Welcome in, everyone. Philly Insider Podcast. We are less than 24 hours away from opening day, first pitch against the Rangers in Texas. The Phillies will be starting the season on the road tomorrow, and they'll come back home after a couple series and play the Reds for the home opener, which I think we're all excited for. And hopefully Trey Turner continues the leadoff home run tradition of a new acquisition in the leadoff spot. So you had Kutch, Schwarber, and now Turner. But you got Nate Rossi here. You got Thomas here. Guys, how you feeling going into opening day tomorrow?
Real excited. That is for sure. It's been a long time without Phillies baseball, but I'll tell you what, it's nice to have a shorter off season than we've had in the last decade. That's for sure. We got to see some meaningful October baseball, and that made the wait a lot shorter, even though it felt pretty long. But I am very excited about this team.
Yep. Just going to piggyback right off of that. Super excited for this. Baseball is my favorite sport, so definitely looking forward to actually fun Phillies baseball. Last year was the first time in a really long time that it truly felt fun to be a Phillies fan. So that's the biggest thing for me. It's going to be a fun season. I know it.
Yeah, I can't remember the anticipation being this high around the Phillies in a while. I mean, even last year, there was a lot of anticipation with Schwarber and Castellanos being added into the mix, but there's still that gut feeling of they're the Phillies. They're going to find a way to underperform. And for the first 2 months, they absolutely did last year. They very much so underperformed, but the way they carried themselves after that and after the managerial change was made and going into this year with a better team than they had last year, it's an exciting time to be a Phillies fan. And let's get to some of these comments here first. I mean, I just see a celebrity in the chat already. Dean Merritt, welcome in. Thank you so much for watching the stream. We appreciate you. I mean, did not expect to be, like I said, graced with the presence of a celebrity. And just honestly shocked they made it tonight. I mean, I just
thank goodness.
Honestly,
a loyal follower for sure. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Philly Sports Talk. Robert, welcome in. Ben, welcome in. We appreciate you having you here. And then Ethan, thank you for tuning in. Nerio, all the way from Italy right now. Thank you so much for your support. And Jose, welcome in. Ready for that Vladdy Guerrero comment at the end of the stream. So, like Ethan said, a long winter, but we made it through. And this, I couldn't agree more with this. This home opener against this rebuilding Cincinnati Reds that have a number of issues on that roster. Oh, that's going to be a fun one. So, let's talk about our roster, though. What'd you say?
Nick Castellanos revenge game.
That would be a great way to get the season kicked off. Yeah, I think we're all hoping for that. And with that said, let's kind of get into this roster a little bit. I kind of want to start with the rotation because obviously we're a little bit depleted there. Andrew Painter went down early in spring with a little bit of an arm issue. He's probably going to be picking up a baseball in a few days here. They said end of the month, so we'll see what happens with that. Hopefully he's okay. And, I mean, it sounds like they are optimistic he will pitch with the Major League club at this point, but, we'll find out for sure soon enough. And Ranger Suarez is a little bit banged up. He had a little bit of a setback with, I believe, his elbow. So has some inflammation there. He's not going to be on the roster to start the year. So our starting rotation will look a little bit different. Obviously, Nola is going to start opening day. Potentially his last opening day as a Phillies starter with the contract situation. We'll see how that plays out. We'll talk about that a little bit. And then Wheeler, and then Taijuan Walker, and then who's in the fourth spot? Bailey Falter and Matthew Strom will be your fifth guy. So, guys, just how are you feeling about this rotation to start the year, and then talk a little bit about the long-term outlook when we get some of those guys back?
Yeah, not as comfortable with it to start the year because of some of the injuries. Ranger's a big piece to miss. I think that part of the reason people are a little bit down on the rotation coming into the year, obviously with the caveat that long-term it looks really good. I think the biggest reason is because people were really excited to see Andrew Painter. And so I think a lot of it is an emotional reaction because by all means, Bailey Falter essentially had this role throughout a good portion of the regular season last year and played pretty well in it. So I have a decent amount of confidence that Bailey Falter can step in and be the next man up and put together some good starts for the Phils. Matt Strom is where I'm most concerned. Obviously, he's the guy with the least experience as far as, quality starts. So we'll see how it goes, right? I will say long-term, though, I am very excited about this rotation. Nola, Wheeler, Ranger, and then, you've got Taijuan Walker, who I think really was a great acquisition for the Phillies. They needed another quality starter. They get him. I'm hopeful that he's going to have a good year. And then you round it out with Andrew Painter. That's a really good looking rotation.
Yeah, for sure. Short term is definitely a concern, but it's a long season. So I don't think we need to ask too much out of guys like Bailey Falter. I think for him specifically, I think it's a really good opportunity for him to step up and show that he can pitch on a big league level, because there are times last year where he really didn't look like he could do that very much. I did like his 2021 season, though. I thought he had some good outings that year. So maybe that was a thing of just players getting used to him. Maybe he can bounce back too. So I'm not overly concerned in the short term personally, because we really just need to tread water. We still have Nola, still have Wheeler. Walker's a great addition. I think we can get by at the very least with these guys. And then, we're talking adding Ranger and Painter, who I think has a lot of potential this year. Long term, definitely something to be happy about, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Just to get to this comment real quick, David, welcome in. Did a video on that earlier, so you can check that out. We'll probably get to it a little bit later in this stream when we get to the position players as well. So just keep that in mind, but we will get to that. As far as the rotation goes, yeah, I'm excited for it. I mean, it's nice to have guys like Wheeler and Nola, who I feel like I don't really have to talk about very much, because we just know we're going to get an excellent performance from them for the majority of the time, right? Taijuan Walker, I'm definitely excited about. I've said this a lot of times. People probably think I sound like a broken record, but to me, it really is about him contributing in the back half of the season. That's where he's had struggles the past 2 seasons with the Mets, has been just kind of tailing off for whatever reason. I don't know if that's fatigue. I don't know if that's just guys are getting a scouting report on him, or the opponents he had. Maybe he had a tougher back half of the schedule. I don't know what it is. But I'm hoping that with a 6-man rotation this year, it's going to be in play at some point. I think that's expected by most, that you're going to get him a little bit more rest. And I honestly think, regardless, I think he has 5-6 pitches that play very well. And I think that's huge. The Phillies like to work with pitchers who have a good pitch mix. And I'm excited to see just what that staff does with him as well. Because, even a guy like him who's a vet, he's established at this point, you could have a completely different performance somewhere else, depending on, the type of coaches you're working with, what they want to get out of you, and just what their plan is. As far as Falter goes, I mean, he's a good player. I think he's, obviously had some issues at times, but I also think he's a guy who, if he can just be a coin flip, I mean, that's huge for you. Like just win a game every other game, or just help get you a series win when, let's say, I mean, look, Wheeler and Nola aren't perfect. They're all going to have their starts where they go down and maybe don't have their best games. And then you have a guy like Bailey Falter who maybe has a surprise performance later in that series. I think that's huge. And then as far as Strom goes, yeah, you really just need him to go 2-3 innings for you, and then to have guys who can piggyback off of him in the bullpen. And I think we have some guys who can eat innings, like a Junior Marte, who I'm hopeful for. And there's some other guys we'll get to as well when we talk about the bullpen. But yeah, you just need him to eat innings early on. And then once you get Ranger back, obviously, like, Ben said, that's his guy. He's a beast. I mean, he's so important to this team long-term, and his long-term health. I'm glad they're prioritizing that too. Because like you said, Thomas, you just got to tread water. And that's what we did last year. I mean, to an extent, obviously we didn't play well early in the season, but we found ways to just, keep ourselves in the race. And then when it was time to go full steam ahead, we did that, and we were healthy when we needed to be. And then as far as Painter goes, yeah, we'll see. I want to be very cautious with him if I'm the Phillies. Don't want to force him into anything. And I think also you have guys like Abel and McGarry, who we'll see how they develop. I mean, they could potentially be like that 6th guy later in the season. We'll see how that develops. But, those are options, depending on whether there's injuries down the road. Those are guys who are probably going to be pitching in AAA and probably pitching pretty well. So I'm excited about this rotation long-term. And I think by the time we get to the postseason, you're going to see some of the guys that were pitching in the rotation in the bullpen that are going to be valuable pieces, like an Andrew Painter. Him in the bullpen in the playoffs is very enticing to me. So that's what I got on the rotation. Let's get to the bullpen a little bit, y'all. This was definitely transformed this offseason with the pickups of Gregory Soto. And I mean, Craig Kimbrell's not necessarily like a transformative piece at this point, but him being your 4th high leverage guy, I mean, out of the, I would probably say Dominguez, Alvarado, and Soto are ahead of him. I mean, that's a pretty good spot for him. He's been a closer pretty much his whole career. So I wonder if he'll appreciate just being in that, fourth role there, and just kind of being, another guy. What are your guys' thoughts on the bullpen going into this season? Thomas, I'll start with you. What do you think about it?
Well, it's ridiculous to me to look at the bullpen and see it as a strength for this team when it just hasn't been for, an eternity and a half. So really hoping that they just continue that momentum they had going into the postseason last year, because they were seriously the strength of the team, the backbone of the team in those last couple series. And it was extremely exciting to see guys like Alvarado and Sir Anthony come up big in big games. And I think the additions that they made with Soto, good lefty to have, good to have, or give Alvarado some time. Probably doesn't have to pitch every single game or nearly as much. I know that was a big thing, kind of staggering him with Sir Anthony in the playoffs last year. That's pretty key to me. I see no reason to be down on this bullpen. They're not going to be perfect. I know that they never have been, but I think they can come up big when asked.
And the bullpen lost them a lot of games last year early in the season. It's been a long time since, or at least it feels like a long time since then, with how far they've come, especially guys like Sir Anthony and Alvarado, who, to your point, were the backbone of the bullpen, which was the backbone of this team. Those guys showed up huge. So you have those guys who are developing their game. If they can play the same way that they did during the playoffs last year and late in the season, it's lights out, forget it, because you add Soto, who is another lefty flamethrower. And I find it really intriguing that they add Soto, and now the Phillies have the two hardest throwing lefty relievers in the game. That's pretty awesome. You're going to see some serious heat. And just a quick note on, actually back to the rotation. A guy you mentioned, Abel, who's in AAA right now, who's probably going to start the season in AAA. That dude's a flamethrower too. And now you have Andrew Painter, who's a flamethrower. The Phillies have really changed their identity from a pitching standpoint and gone out and developed all of these high velocity throwers or acquired them, which I think is awesome. So, Abel obviously looking forward to the future, but with this bullpen, I mean, they've added some really key pieces. And Thomas, I feel the same way as you do. Looking forward, this bullpen is going to be one of the bright spots for this team, when even as early as mid-season last year, they weren't that great. They were losing games for this team. It's going to be the other way around this year, I believe.
Man, it's crazy how far they came from that 2020 season, which they would have broken some records in a bad way if that season wasn't 60 games. I think that's very fair to say. Brandon Workman and Heath Hembry, I mean, just did not work out as deadline acquisitions that year. It's been frustrating sometimes to watch this bullpen, but man, it's an exciting time to be looking at this team and this relief staff. I mean, Sir Anthony was great last year. He had a rough September and then just completely flipped the switch when he got into the postseason. This dude's just got it on him, I think. I think he's just got that dog in him. I don't know how else to say it. He's just got something else to him. And Alvarado, I think, while his performance doesn't always show it, I do think deep down inside he does have a fire. And I think it shows a lot of the time too. Sometimes he just makes bad pitches. I think he goes out there confident every time. It's just, him throwing as fast as he can. Sometimes he leaves it over the middle of the plate. And I know a lot of people are going to be talking about that Alvarado home run all season, but you can't blame him for the one pitch he makes a mistake on. It was the first at bat he had in the postseason was the home run to Juan Yepez, and then last at bat he faced in the postseason was the one to Alvarez. Unfortunately, he started and ended the postseason the same way he finished, but everything in between, we wouldn't have been there without him. And without him having that turnaround mid-season where he got sent down to AAA, worked on his cutter, I don't know if we would have been where we were. It takes just stuff coming together like that over a long season. And if this is true that he's adding a curve in addition to that cutter that already has some serious vertical dip on it, that would be unbelievable. Yeah. I mean, he'd be practically unhittable if his curve was playable. And then, I'm really excited about Soto. I think same issues as Alvarado. He's got to have a little more control, not walk too many guys. And that's something I think the staff can work on. But yeah, like you said, Rossi, having those two guys who throw as fast as they do, I mean, that's a scary combo. And Kimbrel, I mean, I think Kimbrel is going to be a solid pickup. At the time, I think people thought we overpaid a little bit, and then we got Soto, and I think people were a little more okay with the move. I mean, he's obviously had a long track record of success, not much as of recently, but again, I don't think there's a lot of pressure on Kimbrel going into the season. And then once Strom gets out there, I think that's a guy they really like, and obviously he's going to be able to pitch multiple innings, and he might be able to kind of bridge the gap if one of your starters doesn't have a long day. And I think that's huge. You have him instead of, remember when Brad Hand came in game 2 against the Padres, we felt like we were going to take that game. And, if you have Matt Strom in that situation, I'm not saying the result is definitely different, but I think it absolutely could be different. And I feel confident that he definitely has the potential to get there. And like I said, I like Junior Marte a good bit too. I think he's a guy who has some potential. I'm excited to see what the Phillies' plan is with him too. I wasn't expecting him to make the roster, but he did. And credit to him. And I'm trying to think if there's anyone else. Vasquez, I don't think is going to end up being on the roster very long. To me, he's just a placeholder for Strom until he gets back in the bullpen. And I think I pretty much got everyone. Brogdon and Bilotti. I mean, those are two guys who just do their job in the middle innings, and they're not expected to be high leverage guys. But I think Bilotti's going to get better this year too. So excited for those. So, yeah, let's hope so.
A quick note on Alvarado, really quick. Yeah. I think that people were very quick to, just because of the turnaround he had, were very quick to criticize him in the playoffs just because he had a higher ERA, right? He gave up more hits. He gave up more runs. I think it was something like a 5.86 or a 5.89 over the course of the playoffs. But you have to realize the type of hitters that he was facing, like the best of the best, world class. Talking about the Braves and the Padres, some of the hitters that they have, and then that ridiculous lineup of the Astros, Yordan Alvarez. So we have to remember that as Alvarado's going throughout the course of the season, he's not facing those guys as often as he was during the playoffs. And again, high leverage situation. So it's different, and I expect Alvarado to bounce back from the postseason he had. And then a quick note on some of these long relievers. If you get to the point where your rotation is completely healthy, then you have Strom and Bailey Falter, who are guys who can be long relievers and eat up some innings for you. And that's a really great place to be for this Phillies bullpen. With some of the other, shorter, they're not going to go as many innings, right? But guys who are shut down, like Alvarado and Sir Anthony and Kimbrel. So to have those pieces and then some long reliever options too, that is going to be really important for the Phillies and a huge asset.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of that, Rossi, to your point about, Alvarado and the competition level he was facing. I mean, you're talking Juan Soto and Kyle Tucker and Yordan Alvarez. Like, I believe he got Yordan Alvarez out earlier in that series, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I know. Did David Robertson get him out too? I'm not sure. I forget if he might have given up a double or he got him out on a breaking ball. I forget. No, he got Aledmys Diaz out to end the game. But what'd you say?
I was going to say, Yordan didn't have a strong World Series, but, I mean, he did come up when they needed him to.
Yeah. Well, all that matters at the end of the day. But, yeah. But, and to your point, too, Rossi, now Soto can probably carry some of the burden against those lefty guys as well. Not carry the burden, but, like, you're going to be able to kind of pick and choose who you feel like is the better option at that point. And I think it's huge to have two high-leverage flamethrowers who are both lefties late in the bullpen. And then you have Sir Anthony and Kimbrel as righties, too. So it's very exciting. And as we get to the position players, shout out JT Realmuto, who had probably the worst ejection from an umpire. I mean, on an umpire's part, just this guy, if that guy's throwing him out over that, you really can't handle the big leagues. And welcome to Seth as well as we're tuning in here. We're just finishing up on the bullpen, Seth. But did you see that JT Realmuto ejection the other day, Seth?
Hunter, I'm not happy about it. That umpire, there should be some repercussions for that. That was a serious ego trip, and it was pretty funny though. I mean, if that happened in a regular season game, I would be pretty heated about that. But just considering the context that happened in a preseason game, and that ref looked like a douche to the whole nation, it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy shouldn't even be umpiring games in the PIAA at this point.
That's embarrassing.
Yeah, that was atrocious. But Seth, any thoughts? We kind of just talked about the rotation and bullpen, and we're going to move to the position players real quick here before we get to some predictions. But any thoughts just on the pitching heading into this year generally?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough sledding, I think, at first. To your point, I was listening for a couple minutes before I hopped on, just trying to stay afloat the first half of the season, kind of get our bearings a little bit, with just considering the injuries with, Ranger and even considering how deep we went last year, I wonder if that'll have an effect on our pitching staff. But, to your guys' point, we have a better bullpen this year. I think we're going to need them to pitch way better than they did early last season. Ross, you pointed out they did not pitch well early in the year, and that costed us some games. So, hopefully we can have we need Wheeler and Nola to do their thing, young guys to step up. But yeah, I mean, we can hop right into the lineup. You guys pretty much covered all the pitching, so.
For sure. I mean, as Jose said, we're down two of our key guys heading into the season in the lineup. And I mean, that's your heart and soul, right? Rhys Hoskins and Bryce Harper, two guys who are leaders in the locker room. But still, I think there's a lot of hope around this lineup. And I think a lot of us here are probably very optimistic still heading into this season. And we're going to get Bryce back at some point too, which possibly earlier than expected, which I don't think was expected. Even if it's not earlier than expected, I mean, just the fact that we're going to get him back at some point this season, I think is a huge W for us. And I think the projected lineup right now, so the starters is expected to be, I think the top five is supposed to be Turner, Schwarber, is Realmuto hitting third? Does anyone know? And then I think it's going to be JT. This is just projected lineups, but JT, and then Hall probably, I would say, hits cleanup. Castellanos fifth. The bottom of the order, I mean, I think you're probably going to have, it sounds like maybe Jake Cave hits sixth, and then Stott, Bohm, and I think Marsh will hit 9 regardless. I think they like him as a guy to turn it over to the top of the order, and he was hitting leadoff a little bit, so I think they want to kind of get him used to that. But the bottom of the order is going to work in some order like that. I wonder if Christian Pache just got picked up. I don't know if he'll start tomorrow. I don't know if he'll start very much with the Phillies, but we'll see. We'll talk about that when we get to the bench. But how are you guys feeling about the lineup? Seth, I'll go to you first, and Rossi, you can follow, and then Thomas, and I'll finish up. But how are you feeling about the lineup so far, Seth, and just short-term, long-term outlook on it?
Yeah, I mean, we got Captain America at the top of our lineup in Trey Turner. I'm expecting fireworks right off the bat. No pun intended. But, JT behind the dish, no doubt two elite players, arguably the best at their positions. Losing Rhys and Bryce is tough, but next man up mentality. I'm really looking forward to seeing Hall at first base. He's going to need to have a big year and just produce early and often. I think he's in a position where he has the talent, where he could be a better option at first base than Rhys. And it's kind of tough to say that with, we have a lot of great connections with Rhys and that postseason run that still looms largely in my head, even though that opening day is tomorrow, which is pretty hard to believe. But yeah, I mean, it's an exciting lineup regardless. I think Castellanos obviously has to be way better this season. I'm back in on Big Stick Nick. I'm hoping he has a big year. Bohm, I think he needs to step up. Marsh, just all these guys really need to step up and really just hold it down till we get our MVP back. But you saw it last season with our team, how well we played without Bryce. We went on a tear without him and, became playoff contenders before he came back into the lineup. So I have little doubt the team can do that again. Hopefully, like we've been talking about, man, like this, we've been waiting for a Phillies team to make the playoffs just to experience what this fan base is like. And, hopefully that carries them through the struggles the regular season brings. And, I'm ready for October already.
Yeah, Seth, I'm in agreement with you. I think this lineup is still really good, even minus Hoskins and Harper. Trey Turner has the potential to be an MVP someday. Quite frankly, that's how good the guy is. And so you add him to the lineup with Schwarber, and already just having those two guys, you're going to get a lot of offensive production. You have the best catcher in baseball, offensively and defensively, in JT Realmuto. The guy's unbelievable. So you've got a pretty good lineup still, even without Harper. I expect these guys to stay afloat early on in the season before Harper gets back. They did it last year too when he was gone. Let's not forget that. They did it last year when he was gone, even though they had stretches where they had a bunch of guys in and out of the lineup. We keep forgetting that. They had guys in and out of the lineup constantly last year. They were pretty banged up second half of the season. So I expect this lineup to still produce 100%. I think similarly, we'll see a lot of this these young guys like Bohm and Stott and Marsh, who obviously was a trade deadline acquisition, but definitely was a producer second half of the year. I expect some of those young guys to contribute. And then you had guys like Veerling last year who also contributed. You're going to have guys like that this year too. It's going to be different guys, obviously, with Veerling gone. But you're going to have guys who step up who you don't expect. Maybe Derek Hall, maybe he has a good year. You never know. They're going to have guys who step up like that. There's Sosa as well. So I'm confident that the Phillies have enough depth and still enough star power there at the top of the lineup for sure to get things done from an offensive standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Total agreement with you guys. Yeah. Just to go from, I guess, start to end of the lineup. Trey Turner, I agree with Ben. Very good chance to win MVP this season. I'm already that optimistic about him. I mean, if the Phillies have a good season, make the playoffs, win the division, Trey Turner's probably going to be the guy that's going to get the credit for that. I mean, last year, I think he was pretty underrated even in LA, mostly because Freddie Freeman was so dang good that it was hard for Trey to really have that spotlight. So I think Trey being definitely the best hitter on this lineup is going to, for that narrative at least, benefit him. And it'll just give him a really good opportunity to really lead a team and be the best player on a team until Bryce gets back. But I mean, they're basically the same caliber player, the way I look at it. Schwarber, really just hoping he gets that average up. I mean, it was pretty not great for a guy that was, as much as we relied on him. So if he can get that up to like anything, like 250, that's probably going to be tough for pitchers to pitch against. Assuming, he's still cracking home runs just like he did last year. JT, I thought, finished the season superbly well. I thought he was super underrated going into the playoffs.
Yeah.
And I don't think he was getting nearly enough national attention. I mean, he was really carrying the lineup in that August-September stretch. Really strong performance from him. Just, I don't really see any reason why he would slow down. I mean, maybe age, knees are getting to him, but I'm still optimistic towards him. I'm also really optimistic towards Alec Bohm, too. I mean, I think he's shown some good hitting, some power in the spring training. So I would keep an eye on him. I also thought he was absolutely crucial in that summer last year without Bryce. I mean, he was best, in my opinion, he was the best player in the National League in July. That bozo from Atlanta stole the honors from him, but that's besides the point. I'm also high on Derek Hall. I think he's had a strong spring training. I think if it wasn't a contract year for Reese, it would be probably not as intriguing. You just kind of want to hope he'd fill in that gap, but it could make things interesting for the Phillies later down the line if he has a pretty good season. Castellanos, I don't want to be like pessimistic towards him, but like, I mean, he set the bar pretty low last year, I guess. So really anything to show that was once an MVP caliber player, that would be nice. And then Stott, Marsh, I'm optimistic for them too. I think given more time to develop, I think they're in good shape. And again, I mean the depth with Sosa, Cave, I think these are guys that can at least plug in for a bit. I mean, I really like Sosa too, actually, going down the stretch. I thought he was pretty key, so good depth piece to keep around. But yeah, I mean, I think this is probably a top, I mean, even not healthy, it's probably easily a top 10 lineup in the league. I mean, fully healthy, it's probably top 3 if I'm gonna be totally honest.
I'm definitely still excited for this lineup. I mean, you guys kind of covered most of it. I think a Nick Castellanos comeback is imperative at this point. It kind of has to happen. Like I think Tim Kelly from Phillies Nation wrote an article about the lineup, and he said, I think he basically was saying at first it was kind of a luxury if it happened, right? Because you had Trey Turner, Reese was still healthy. We're going to get Bryce back at some point. Now with Reese down for the whole year, I mean, you kind of need it to happen. It's not really any way around it. And if it doesn't, I mean, I think Bohm's going to play well enough. I agree with you, Thomas. I'm very high on Bohm going into the season that he should honestly surpass Castellanos if Castellanos doesn't get the job done early in this season. And that might even benefit Castellanos just moving down a little bit in the order as well, a little less pressure on him. So, and I agree with you guys. Trey Turner is, I mean, this would be nuts if he had 40 home runs and 40 stolen bases. Oh my goodness, that would be a historical season. I wouldn't put it past him.
I think that makes him the best player in the league at that point, quite frankly.
Yeah. And I agree with Ben and Thomas. I was thinking before the stream that if I had to pick an MVP, and we'll get to this a little bit later, but like if I had to pick someone on the Phillies who could probably win MVP for this season, man, I think it has to be Trey Turner, and I really think he's got a good shot at it. Schwarber, like you said, Thomas, I mean, I think with the shift going away too, all those hard hit balls to the right side that were caught by a second baseman, halfway to right field, those are going to be singles now. And, he's a guy who just gets on base in general. He works the count. He's very good with his approach at the plate. I'm excited about him going into this season. And yeah, Derek Hall, I mean, I think his approach looked better in spring training. He had a number of walks. He cut down on the strikeouts a little bit. If that translates into the regular season and, he does that against some higher level pitching, he's going to be absolutely fine. And, I think you're probably going to play Boehm at first and Sosa at third when, we're playing a lefty, at least to start. I mean, maybe you add a platoon later in the season. But I think Hall's going to play fine enough to where you don't really need to add some high-level first baseman. I don't expect it to get that bad. And hopefully it doesn't, But yeah, I agree with you, Thomas. I mean, Sosa's he might be my favorite Philly right now. I love that guy. He's a fun player, good defensive guy, elite speed. He just contributes whenever he's in the lineup. I mean, every single time he's on the field, he's a big-time player. So lives for the moment. And yeah, I mean, I'm excited for Marsh too. He didn't really have a ton of time with the coaching staff last year. Now he gets a full season. He gets a full off season with them as well. I think he's got to watch out for. I don't think he's going to have an elite season or hit a lot of home runs or hit for power very much. But I think he's going to turn it over to the top of the order with a man on base. And I think that's so important to have a 9-hitter who can do that. And Stott, I'm a little bit hesitant on just because I think there are some alarming signs with his, just his swing. But I am hopeful that as the season progresses, he'll carry over that approach that he had at the end of the season from, I think in August and September, he hit like 280. And in the playoffs, I don't know what his average was, but the hits he had in the playoffs came in crucial spots and a lot of doubles down the line off of breaking balls where he was working the count, just fouling off fastball after fastball. So I think obviously next part of it will just be laying off the high fastball, but also putting the fastball in play a little bit more this year. So defensively, I have no concerns about him. And honestly, defensively, my only concerns are really corner outfield, which I think late in games, you now have Pache, who we'll get to in a minute, but you have Cave as well, who I think will be absolutely fine. You have Sosa. Boehm has played pretty well at third base over the past half a year, maybe more than that. Only concerns for me are really first base with Derek Hall, just because you haven't seen him there very much, but he's got a full season to get comfortable there. So I feel good about this lineup, and I didn't even mention JT. I mean, best catcher in baseball, not even a question. And honestly, he kind of subtly had an MVP case while Bryce was out of the lineup because of what he does defensively. Yeah, he was phenomenal last year. So excited for JT. He hasn't really shown signs of aging. It is funny to think back to some of the people who were saying like maybe move him to first base just because he's not even like a slight on them. It's just he's so good at catcher still. So yeah, a little long on the lineup there for me, but that's what I got. I'm excited for it. And yeah, do we want to get to some of these comments before we move to the bench here? I haven't taken a look, but I see there was some that poured in here.
Absolutely, yeah.
So. Man, I can just hear the bank going nuts already. Aren't we all hoping for that? Oh my.
I cannot wait for this home opener. Oh my goodness.
I'm ecstatic for it. It's going to be electric. Even with him out of the National League East, we still have to deal with Jacob deGrom at the beginning of the season. Yeah, funny.
Yeah, of
funny
course.
Yeah.
First game, yeah.
Yeah. I specifically remember Nick Maton getting a couple base knocks off of deGrom always. I always bring that up, but hopefully we see some of the Phillies daycare do some damage against him again at the back of the order there. So what else? I missed another lineup. That didn't sound I feel like we were pretty enthusiastic about the lineup. Welcome in, Kath. Only positive was Turner, JT, and Harper. I feel like we mentioned a lot more positives than that.
Boehm, Hall.
Yeah, Boehm, Hall. I mean, I was pretty high on Marsh. I feel like we all feel solid about Marsh, right? And you're getting Harper back too. I feel like there's only a few negatives. So sorry if it came off that way, but Castellanos 800 OPS, 25 plus homers. That would be ideal if you get back to that form.
This might be the best. If he does that this year and you get Bryce Harper back, this could absolutely be the best lineup in baseball, 100%, if Castellanos is able to hit that well.
For sure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And yeah, David says, Ethan, from your lips to the baseball guys here. Absolutely.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Lucas, welcome in. Crazy the season is already upon us. Felt like yesterday I was in y'all stream when we were going to the World Series. Wild. I mean, that was it. I feel like the World Baseball Classic really sped everything up just because there was meaningful baseball for a little bit. And then you're like, oh, we're back in the spring training. And before you know it, it's like, no, there's only like a week and a half of spring training after that. And now we're here. Shout out Zach Hovland's nap time. Yeah. Yeah. I'd be happy to see Castellanos having a mediocre regular season and then turning into a beast in September in the postseason. Yeah, I just feel like at that point though, you're not feeling good about him going into the postseason anymore. Like,
that's two full years of not hitting well.
Yeah, his confidence is almost deteriorated, and oh my gosh, this is unfortunately like accurate, and I hate that this is like so accurate right now. I
think it's worse though. I honestly, in my opinion, I think it's worse than Tobias Harris because Tobias Harris was never in the conversation for an MVP at any point in his career, not even close. Castellanos was one of the league's premier players for a short time. And so to have him there to where he's at now, and quite frankly, it's difficult to compare these guys because they're different sports, of course. I like the comparison, though. I just think it's actually worse for Castellanos because he was a better player than Tobias ever was. And I think he's actually performed worse than Tobias ever has, quite frankly, this past year.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, Tobias got overpaid, which isn't his fault. Credit to him and his dad. I believe his dad is his agent. And I mean, end of the day, I mean, he's still been like a solid role player. Like, I don't think he's like, I think if he didn't have the contract, we all think Tobias was like a fine player. You know, like, I don't think we think he's anything amazing, but does his role a lot of the time. But relative to the contract, it's pretty rough.
Yeah,
Tobias is a good fourth piece. That's what he is. Maxey surpassed him. We all know that, and obviously Harden and Embiid.
Yeah, it's just tricky because, like, relative to basketball, I think the Sixers are tied to Tobias more than the Phillies are tied to Nick. You know,
it's very true. Yeah.
So it just kind of looks uglier from that optic, but it is a ironic comparison, especially since they're both Philadelphia athletes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. No nap ever again. I'm with you on that one, Dean Merritt. And I did forget about this. I forgot he got a couple hits off of DeGrom back in the day. But
nap time for DeGrom.
Speaking of bench players like Andrew Knapp, let's get to the bench. And I'm not going to lie, y'all, I'm super hyped about this bench. I feel like we got a great group heading into this year. So, obviously, Garrett Stubbs, he's a great backup catcher in my opinion. We'll see how he does this season. Sometimes those guys can fluctuate a little bit, but I thought he was great last year. And then off of that, you have Jake Cave, and Mundo Sosa, Josh Harrison, and you'd assume Christian Pache. Pache is out of options. They can't option him down to AAA at this point. And Dalton Guthrie has an option, and he's the only other right-handed outfielder. I mean, you'd assume that's what's going to happen is Dalton Guthrie's going to go down to AAA, which after the spring Guthrie had, I think it's probably for the best. But talk to me about – I'll be right back, but talk to me about the bench a little bit and what you guys are feeling going into this season with these guys.
Yeah, I can start with this one. I feel really good about the Phillies' depth. Offensively, yes, but especially defensively. I think that you have a decent amount of guys. Obviously, your center field position is shored up, and that's really nice that we're not platooning that like we were in years past. No more Adam Hazley, no more Roman Quinn and Odubel Herrera. None of that, thankfully.
Brutal.
The nice thing is that you have that shored up, and especially with the corner infielders that you have. So you got defense there, but you've got some good defense on the bench, 100%. And I really like this move with Pache because, like you said, Hunter, when you're thinking about late game situations where you want to remove one of these quarter infielders, Schwarber or Castellanos, because their defense isn't great. Now you've got another option to put there in the corner outfield when you want to try to end a game with a lead. So that's in my mind, this is a very, very deep bench, particularly from a defensive standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll hop in here next. I mean, look, I'm not going to lie. Christian Pache was kind of my guy last year. Like, I'm a little bit biased. Like, I'm a huge fan of him. I couldn't be a fan of him when he was on the Braves for obvious reasons. So as soon as he went to the Athletics, I was like, all right, like, this is awesome. One of my favorite, like, non-Phillies teams. And baseball is one of those sports where I try to get player shirts of like other players and other teams because I played and I just love the game. And for like football, it's a little too personal. Like I'm not trying to have a jersey of someone who's going to play the Eagles. Like if Christian Pache and the Athletics beat the Phillies one game, I'm not really upset about it, and we're probably not going to see them in the World Series, at least for a long, long time. So
yeah,
I'm a huge fan of him. I mean, he's got elite speed. He has a heck of an arm. He covers a lot of ground. Not only that, he gets to the baseball quickly. Like he reads it well off the bat. It's just really the hitting with him. If he can get a little bit better at the plate, I mean, I think he's a potential like platoon guy at some point. I think he hit 326 against lefties in the minors last year. I don't know if there's a track record on that says he's always hit well against lefties, but that's a good sign. A guy who can maybe platoon with Brandon Marshall a little bit. We'll see how that works out. And yeah, like you said, Rossi, I mean, he's definitely a guy who's going to be a defensive replacement late in games. I am very excited to see how he does. I think he's a really nice bench piece to have. And the way they worked with Sosa last year, a guy who struggled with strikeouts and was really good defensively, had elite speed. I think Pache is a little bit worse than Sosa was coming in, but I think there's absolutely room to grow. And you just can't really rule anything out with the player development we have. And
he's a young guy, too. He's a really young guy.
Yeah, he's 24. And he's got all the traits. He's 6'2", 215. He's got the build. And also he's now your definitive backup center field option too. You didn't have that before. You had Jay Cave who could play there. You had Guthrie who could play there, but Pache plays it really, really well. And I think that's really important to have a guy like that, because otherwise an injury happens. You're calling up Muzziotti or Rojas as your emergency center field options, who are guys who can play center field well defensively, but I mean, Pache has a lot more potential with the bat, and he's had big league at bats. Those guys are not anywhere near ready for big league at bats, in my opinion. So, very excited about him. But getting to the rest of the bench, we talked about Sosa a little bit. I won't really talk too much more about him because I think it's kind of self-explanatory, and had a tremendous spring. He showed a lot of pop. I'm excited about him. To me, he's a guy who can do a little bit of everything. Stubbs, I think I already talked about him. Great backup catcher, good lefty to have off the bench, and a guy who actually produces when he needs to catch a pitcher every 4 days, every 5 days, something like that, when JT needs a day off. So I think he did a great job last year. And then Harrison, I mean, he's a vet. His last stint with the Phillies was very short-lived in the COVID year. Comes back a couple of years later after reviving his career, and he's a better player now. I think he's a guy who's going to have a good back half of his career, can play all over. He's going to play a little bit early in the season, I think, and he's versatile. He can play a lot of different positions. I think he's going to be a great addition to this team. And then Cave's coming off at a heck of a spring training. I'm just concerned with him, less reps. He had a lot of reps his first 2 years and then kind of fell off when he didn't get as many reps. So I'm concerned maybe now that spring's over and he's not going to be playing as regularly, that he won't play as well. But I do think he's going to start a good bit early in the season, and then one of Schwarber or Castellanos will DH. So I think he's going to get playing time. He's going to get a chance to prove himself. It's just really when Bryce comes back, how valuable he'll be is my concern. So, but I still like him. He proved himself. There was no way you could keep him off the roster coming into spring. Credit to him. He forced the Phillies' hand and earned a spot. And I also think when people started shifting him a little bit more, he didn't hit as well. Now that's gone. So that's another benefit for him. That's what I got on the bench. And I think, honestly, it just goes down to AAA, too. Guthrie, I think, is a solid player who can play in the big leagues. You saw that last September. I think there's a number of other guys in AAA, too, who can contribute at some point. I mean, I don't know if Kingery is going to follow up that spring training he had. Obviously, he was kind of a bust for us, but did work a lot with Kevin Long this offseason. His swing looks better. I mean, he's not on the 40-man roster, so he's not like an immediate replacement, but he's a guy who could potentially contribute down the road. And Cody Clemens, I mean, he had a great spring. Again, another guy a young guy, maybe he does well with a new coaching staff and a new team and just a new destination. So I think you have some depth down there, and I'm excited for those guys as well. I mean, let's get to some of these comments, and then we'll get to some predictions, and then we'll wrap up here. Let's get back to the top. Get ready for the Castellanos rebound back to reality. Oh, my God. What a comment. We'll not give up hope on Cassie. If we go into the season with really low expectations on Cassie, we will be extremely happy if he improves.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I agree.
We've set the bar so low for this guy.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. I think the harsh reality of that comment, though, is that a lot of fans are hoping he's going to return to MVP form, which, even if he doesn't return to MVP form, it could still be a successful season if he just plays somewhat well, right? He doesn't have to play. I'm
just looking for him to be solid. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, this was rough last year. Tobias Harris over me still hurts a year later. Such a long baseball season. I hope we go through it as healthy as possible. Yeah, tough to be as healthy as the Eagles were with 22 starters playing healthy in the Super Bowl, but hopefully somewhat close to that. Phillies had a lot of guys healthy at the end of the year, so definitely Good to see. Turner's locked in. He just hit a homer against me in MLB The Show. Good to
All
know.
good signs.
Virtual Trey Turner is also ready for the season to start. And Ethan doubling down on his prediction for comeback player of the year. Would love to see that.
We're going to hold you to it.
For sure. Ethan, I'm pulling for Nick. We need him to be great this year. This lineup would be beyond elite if he has a massive year. Absolutely.
It's true. He's the missing piece right now for the Phils.
Yeah, Dilchimeris always calls Odubel Herrera like the veggie straws of center fielders. So, yeah, kind of accurate if you ask me. But
he had some boneheaded moments, that's for sure, out there in center field.
Yeah, he did. Interesting player. Nick rebounding would be huge if we see more of last year, say a month into the season. Yeah, the first month of the season, he actually was playing real well last year. And then I don't know if it was the wrist injury that held him back, but that was probably a little bit part of it. Ever since then, he was not performing well the rest of the season. So, yeah, I saw that for Pache, unfortunately. He's going to have to really improve as a hitter for sure to be valuable. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another name in center field, Roman Quinn, who, great guy, but not.
It was a forgettable group. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. This group could be the makings of the best bench in the MLB. Yeah, I mean, if they live up to their potential, I think it's kind of like an underrated bench because they're so young outside of Harrison, and outside of Cave too, even Stubbs. But I guess like my point being, you have Sosa and Pache, and then some other guys in the minors who are going to play at some point this year. I'm confident saying like Clemens and Guthrie, who are going to contribute in my opinion. So. Yeah, no Bradley Zimmer. Yeah, that was a very short-lived 8-game stretch last year. He did his job, though. I mean, he was sure fine in those 8 games. Love how Cave looks like 50 years old with those gray hairs. Yeah,
the caveman. Yep.
Yeah. Shout out Jared Hughes, the guy who ran out to the mound when J.T. Realmuto was shaking his head for that gift that was on in our memories. But
I didn't even know his name, to be honest with you.
Yeah. How concerned are you with Rob handling a team with a lot of talent and ego? I'll just go first on this. I'm not concerned at all. I think those guys really like Rob, and I think he's just built such a great culture there that wasn't there when Girardi was there. There was a lot of guys who just didn't seem like they didn't want to. They didn't really feel like they wanted to play and didn't have much motivation to play. And I think the thing is, Rob kind of lets these guys. I don't think it's much of an ego thing. I think Rob just lets these guys be themselves, and then when it's time for him to step in and give them a speech or just talk about sticking to their objectives, he does that.
It's a really close team. You can tell that these guys love each other, and you saw that throughout the playoffs last year, how close this team is. I think some of them do have a little bit of an ego, but I think it's in a good way, right? That's a fine line to walk. If anybody on this team has an ego, it's Bryce Harper. And you know what? I love that because he stands at second base after getting a big hit and he says, this is my house, and that's what I want to see. So I think you do have some egos, but I think these guys genuinely love each other. It's a very tight clubhouse. And I think you really saw them come together as a team last year as they were making the playoffs for the first time in a long time and then going through that playoff run.
Mm-hmm, for sure. I think Rob's had a great hand on this team. I think he's really had his finger on the pulse in every facet, whether the lineup, the young guys, the bullpen. I really trust him to be able to get this group going when they need to get going. I mean, Girardi was having stock go down to AAA, and then as soon as he was gone,
oh my goodness,
stop went on a tear for like 2 weeks, I swear. Mm-hmm. I was just like, so this was what Girardi was doing all this time. Like, you could really tell around June, a couple of days leading up to it, that the players really did not care too much for Girardi. And it just feels like the whole spirit of the team did a 180 when Rob came around. I'm not going to say they're going to, go 162-0 under Rob, but like, feel pretty good with him leading the helm.
Yeah, and getting to this comment here, the caveman is going to do some thumping. I
think the caveman's in center field for the Phillies, in my opinion. Have you seen Marsh?
Honestly, I think Derek. Wait, were you asking a question? Sorry.
No, I was just saying Marsh definitely looks
remarking
like
on Marsh's appearance. Oh, he does look like a caveman.
Yeah.
He makes
Captain Caveman with Captain Caveman with Marsh, and then Caveman with Cave. Gonna love it. Honestly, I think Derek Hall will have a huge season. I think he will have a huge step up and prove that he's a major league player. That would be huge. I mean, I would love if that happened. And Mike says, boom, breakout year, 25 home runs. Oh my goodness, that would be that'd be a special year. I think he's got the potential to do it now that he's really worked on the power a little bit this offseason. So, and as far as Dancing on My Own, I believe Schwarber said they will have a new song, and we'll find out about it soon. So, with that said, let's do a little bit of predictions here, talking about some awards to give out. We'll go MVP, Cy Young, reliever of the year. I feel like that covers kind of all the bases. And then we'll talk about the over-under 87.5 wins. So MVP, I mean, Thomas, you kind of hinted at it earlier. So did Ben. I'm going with Trey Turner. I just think he was already on a tear going into the season, the World Baseball Classic. It didn't end in spring training. And, man, especially with the new rules in place with bigger bases, the pickoff rules and all that, and the pitch clock being able to kind of, time up a pitcher, winding up and all that, I think it just benefits Trey. And I think he's going to be a guy who gets on base at least once or twice every single game. Obviously it's not going to happen the whole season, but that's valuable to have a guy like that who's going to be on base the majority of the time, or at least in baseball terms, right? A fourth of the time or two-fourths of the time. It's huge. I'm excited for Trey this year.
100% in agreement with that. He's going to be the guy. He's got to be the guy until at least Bryce comes back.
I want to pick somebody else, but I can't. It's the obvious answer. Trey Turner is going to cement himself as one of the elite players in this. He already has cemented himself as one of the elite players in this league, but I think he's going to take it to a whole new level this year. I think he's going to be in MVP conversations if he doesn't win it. And he's going to be the Phillies' best player, definitely.
Yeah, if Nomad's right, hopefully he steals 100 bases like Jonathan Papelbon thinks. But I don't really know if I put too much stock into what Jonathan Papelbon's thinking. So
that's fair.
Yeah. Let's go Cy Young. I mean, I'll go to you guys first because I want to see what your guys' answers are.
Go ahead, Nate.
Oh, that's tough. I think this is going to be the year that Aaron Nola gets it done. I liked what I saw out of him last year. I was really down on him for a while. I just thought he didn't have it. And last year, when Rob Thompson finally took over and was very, very intentional in getting Aaron Nola some extra rest, it was the difference maker. And what we've seen out of Aaron Nola is that when he doesn't pitch well, it's because of fatigue. He's a guy who gets fatigued a little bit easier than other guys will. That's just the truth, unfortunately. It's the reason that he slowed down at the end of the World Series. It's because he was fatigued. They had pitched him so much. That's always been his issue, whether it's fatigued going into the later part of the game or fatigued as he gets towards the end of the season and he has a September where he falls apart. We saw it over and over again. Last year, we didn't see that for the first time. And I think now that Rob Thompson is going to be the manager of this team the entire year, and he's going to be able to manage Aaron Nola the entire year, it's going to get even better than it was last year. And Aaron Nola had a very good year last year. I'm picking Aaron Nola.
Mm-hmm. Solid pick. I thought about picking Nola too, but I kind of want to be different. Although with Nola, I mean, contract year, if they can just rest him enough, because that's really my big concern with him is just him getting enough rest. I mean, I think he has a lot to prove for sure. And I think he's the obvious answer, but I just want to be different. I'm going to pick Painter. I think once they get him back, I feel like there's a lot of reason to be hopeful with him and optimistic that he can kind of step into a pretty solid starting role. And, maybe he goes down to bullpen later down the season when, games get a little tighter. But I think there's a real shot that he becomes a critical member of this pitching lineup or pitching staff. And mostly because of his youth and his ability to just kind of take batters by surprise. And batters probably don't know a lot about him right now. It's going to take a while for them to get comfortable with him. I think he has a real shot to just take the league by storm right now.
Yeah, I would pick Ranger, but him starting off the season on the IL isn't super promising. So I don't know if he'll have the numbers the other guys have in terms of totals at least. ERA and WHIP I think will still be good, like strikeouts and all the other stuff. But what'd you say?
It's a long season.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I like what you guys said about, just obviously there's going to be a 6-man rotation, and also the bullpen is upgraded. Like, these guys are going to have a little more rest and be able to last a little bit longer into the postseason, I think, too. I'll take Wheeler. You guys left him for me. I feel like I got to pick. Someone's got to pick him. He's obviously just a beast. I think next year is his contract year. So if they don't extend Nola, I mean, even if they do extend Nola, I think they'll probably bring back Wheeler. But he's one of those guys who I just kind of see him as like, a Verlander or a Scherzer or like a Yu Darvish or like Charlie Morton, not in terms of like caliber, but in terms of a guy who's going to last into the latter years of his career, still throwing at a high velocity. And I think he's just a guy who just performs every single game in and game out. You know what you're going to get from him. You're going to have a few clunkers from him, here and there every once in a while, but it's not very often. And when he needs to pitch well, he's going to turn it on. You saw that in World Series Game 6. Unfortunately, got taken out 70 pitches, but I mean, he turned it on, and we were a little bit worried about him just having dead arm going into that game. He turned in an exceptional performance and through 6 innings or something like that. So credit to him. And again, just a guy who what you're getting from him. And honestly, I mean, nice thing about him is he kind of gets his bad outings out of the way in spring. I mean, last year he didn't really have a spring, so it was unfortunately the month of April that he got his bad outings out of the way because of the lockout. They didn't really have much of a spring, but that's the nice thing about him is, even if he pitches garbage in spring, you're not worried about him at all because you know what he can do. And he's probably working on something and maybe leaving some pitches in the zone, but he's probably messing around with some stuff, trying to figure out, some new tactics to attack hitters. But they're not working on scouting report too much at that point in the season. So excited about him. Reliever of the year, I am going to go. This is a tough one. I feel like I want to pick Soto because I'm a huge fan of him, but he's just a little bit risky with the walks. I need to see him get that down a little bit. I'll just I feel like this is kind of the easy pick. I'm not saying you guys are going to pick him, but Sir Anthony, I mean, just a guy who's dominant. He comes through when you need him to. Came a long way from Tommy John, but not only that, before he had Tommy John, I mean, there were times where he came into close and did have some issues just because he was a younger guy, but I think he turned it on when he needed to this year. And yeah, maybe he wasn't closing out games, but he was facing the middle of the lineup in the 8th inning. And that was kind of our strategy was, look, I don't care if he's, I don't care if he's closing out games or pitching the 8th. He's getting the 3, 4, and 5 hitters every single time. Did the job. I think that's so huge to have a guy like that who pitches against the best part of the order every single time.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I want to be different, but on this one, I have to agree with you. Sir Anthony's just the guy. He's probably my favorite pitcher on the roster right now. He blew me away last year. I just had such confidence every time he came into a game. It's like, we're good now. These 3 outs coming right up. His improvement from where he was before and just his story to come back years down the line and be this good, like an elite player in the bullpen for us and like in closing situations at times was just unbelievable. So I'm super excited to see him continue that.
I'm going to go with Jose Alvarado. I think he's going to put it all together. I think that he obviously struggled a little bit over the course of the World Series, and he struggled in the playoffs a little bit more than he did late in the season. But I think that was helpful experience for him. And now that I hear he might be developing a curveball, I am definitely going to go Jose Alvarado. And just for the record, I am in the office right now. I'm not in my bedroom. My bedroom is decked out with, Phillies, Flyers, Eagles, Sixers. So the only reason there's no wall decorations is because I'm in the office, not at home.
Where do you work? Witness protection?
Yes.
Classic. The last thing, we'll just go real quick over under for 87.5 wins. I'll go over. I think that they're probably going to, I don't want to say hover around 500. I think they'll be better than that, but I think they're going to be like solid to start the season. And then I really think September is when they're going to turn it on and make their case that they're a team to be really afraid of going into the postseason. And I think they get over 90 wins this year. So I'll put them at 90, 93 for this season.
I'm going to say mid-90s. I'm definitely going to take the over here. And the number one reason why is because the schedule changes this year. Last year, the Phillies played a lot of really tough games against the Mets and the Braves. That's not going to be the case this year. You're playing every team in the league the same amount of times. And so I think this is crazy, but I think there's potential that you could see 300 win teams in the NL East. Not 300, but 100 win teams in the Braves, the Mets, and the Phillies in the NL East, just because the way the schedule works out. I think the Phillies are going to be mid to upper 90s as far as wins. And I know that's probably a little bit ambitious, but I think because of what they've done with the bullpen and their starting rotation, that it's going to be a good year.
For sure. We can definitely get some free wins on like the Athletics and the Orioles and stuff. That'll be fun. I think you have every reason in the world to be optimistic. Just looking at their win total last year, and obviously they still have to play the Braves and Mets, who I don't think did a lot to significantly improve this year, and just the general feel of the rest of the National League. I think I'm going to hit 91 for win total, definitely above the over. That number seems pretty lenient, but I don't expect anyone to favor, the National League champions. That's fine. We don't want to be the favorites anyway. But I do think they have a favorable schedule, favorable division. It sucks because if they were at full health the whole season, I would pick them to win the division.
Yeah, that's
easily.
The only problem.
But I mean, I think they'll still be in great playoff position anyway. And who knows in September? I don't think there'll be a huge gap between the Braves and Mets and the Phillies coming down in the last couple of weeks. So see what happens.
Y'all, I'm really excited for the season. It was fun previewing it with you guys. And just real quick before I wrap up, we'll give like one bold take for the season. Mine is, maybe this isn't so bold after spring training, but I'll go Edmundo Sosa. Give me double-digit home runs for him this year. I think he's going to play a decent bit. I think he's got some extra pop with him this spring. And that's what I got. Any bold takes real quick? It's okay if you don't have one. I kind of put you guys on the spot, but anything you guys want to say?
Derek Hall goes deep 30-plus times this year. Derek Hall breaks onto the scene.
30 home runs. Then we would never see Reese again in a Phillies uniform.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I know I said Trey Turner is my MVP, but if I would say a bold take, I would say Alec Boehm's going to be the Phillies' best player this year. Because why?
That is all. Yeah. Oh, I love that one. Well, that's all we got, y'all. Thank you so much for tuning in. We really do appreciate it. And we're excited to get the season underway tomorrow. I was going to do a live play-by-play, but I think I'm going to do a post-game. I think that's a little easier to do that, less time. And hopefully some of these guys can hop on too if they watch the game. And can't wait for tomorrow. So 4:05 Eastern, I believe, we'll be in Texas playing the Rangers. And with that said, Jose, with his last always Vladimir Guerrero to Philly comment, we appreciate it. And anything you guys want to say before we sign off?
Go Phils, baby.
Yep. Go Phils.
Let's get it. Tomorrow, 4:05. We'll see you guys after the game. Have a good one.